Hello, in this video I want to show you everything you can do with emails using Peakboard. I'll show you how you can receive emails, how you can display their content, how you can continue working with emails, but also how you can send emails, send screenshots, send a part of the screen as a screenshot, and everything else that's possible with our email data sources and our email scripting options. To do this, I'll show you here in the Peakboard Designer, first of all, how to set up an email data source. There are two particularly relevant data sources for this. These are the Outlook data source and the email data source. Depending on which email account you want to use, you select either email or Outlook accordingly. I'll start here with the regular email data source, and I'll just call it, let's say, My Mail. As with every data source, you can first specify the refresh interval up here, in this case every 90 seconds, and simply enter the incoming and outgoing server of your mail server here, that is the IMAP or SMTP server. In my case, I've already saved this data in advance and I'll just enter it here. Below, you also have the option to select which folder. If you want to display a folder from your email provider, you typically just leave it set to inbox, because most of the time you want to display the inbox. You can also select a different folder if you want. Here you also have the option to define how many emails should be loaded at most. All of them, or just a specific number. And here you can also choose whether you want to read out the entire message, meaning the full content of the email. Or is just the subject enough for you? So for example, if you want to use the email data source as a trigger to do something, you can simply put that in the subject line. Then you don't need to load the entire message. In case you do want to load this message, you also have the option to choose whether you want to read it formatted as HTML or as plain text. Of course, that also depends on your use case. Do you really want to display exactly how this email looks with images and formatted text? Or do you just want to extract the content, for example, to display it in a text ticker? I'll click on Load Data here, and now I simply get the last 10 emails from my email data source. I'll click OK here, and now I'll do the same thing again with an Outlook email. In this case, I'll select the Outlook data source under Office 365. I'll select the Outlook data source under Office 365. And here I can authenticate myself with Microsoft. Once I've done that, I can also read my Outlook folders here. Here too, there is, among others, the inbox as well as several other folders. I can also select here from which time period I want to retrieve my emails. When I do that, a code is entered here by default. We can take a quick look at that. If we leave it as it is, it means that I subtract 2 days from my time data source. That means from now minus 2 days until, where the current date is simply entered, until now. So these would be the emails from the last 2 days. Here too, I have the option at the bottom to choose whether I want to read the content as HTML or just as plain text. Here too, I click on Load Data to load the data source. Now I'll show you how we can display this email. For example, for the plain content, how does that work now? Like we did for the upper data source, for the text, we could display it as a text ticker, for example. So I take my email address here and then the body of the message. Additionally, if I really want to display the email formatted as HTML, I can select an HTML code element here under Others. I'll give it a name here so I can reference it later. I'll call it Widget. And now in my Outlook data source, where I've loaded the data as HTML, I can, for example, create a reloaded script like this. Here, I simply set the HTML code to the first row of my Outlook data source from the content that I'm reading out here as HTML. If we click on preview, we can see the data from both email addresses here. At the top is the content, and here is the HTML. So now we not only have the option to read out emails, but we can also use different methods to send emails. For example, this could be controlled by a schedule, like sending out a report once a day. But you can also do that. It can also be triggered if, for example, a value becomes too high, like the temperature of a machine getting too high, etc. And then we want to trigger it. Here I have various options. I can simply send an email under the email section. If I do it this way, I can select a connection here. So this now refers to the connection behind my email data source that I set up earlier. Here I simply enter the recipient's address, the subject and content, which I can of course also populate with various variable values. I also have the option to attach a screenshot of my entire interface that I see. For example, if I want to send out a report like this once a day, I could display here what is currently shown on the screen. This can be done in two different ways. One way is as an attachment. If I use send email with screenshot, or with send email with screenshot in body, then it's included as part of the email, meaning in the body of the email and not as an attachment. This is especially interesting if I want to send the email to a Microsoft Teams channel, because it can only display images if they are in the body. If I want to send an email via this Peakboard server, then I can skip creating such a connection or such an email data source. In that case, it runs through the Peakboard server and not through your own email address. This is the fastest way, because then you don't have to worry about anything else. Here too, of course, you have the recipient, the content, and the subject. You also have the option to send emails via your Office 365, that is, through your Outlook account. Here as well, there is the option to send the email. But you can also do things like mark an email as read or move an email to a folder. For example, when you press a button to move the email. Lastly, I want to show you how you can send a specific part of your screen by email. Often you don't want to send the entire content, meaning a full screenshot of your screen, but just a part of it. In that case, for example, you could create a selection. Now I'll just add a few elements, a header and a body. And now I select these elements here and can group them together. Now we can see here on the left side that it has created a group from them. And here I have the same option as with the screenshot. I can also send just this group by email. So I could now create a separate email view here, hide it, briefly show it, send it as an email, and then hide it again. And in this way, I can design my report exactly how I want it to appear in my email. In this case, I see here under screens that there are now these groups, and here I can select send screenshot as email and then send this group via the Peakboard mail server or my own mail server to the recipient, including a body and subject. That was everything you need to know about emails in Peakboard. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.